Now to the huge story that almost no one's actually touching. It's not that faffing around about how opposition leader Peter Dutton skipped down to Sydney for a fundraising dinner nearly 4 days before ex-cyclone Alfred hit his state of Queensland. Oh, Labor's been in hysterics about that. The scandal, which is crazy. I mean, Dutton isn't even in government. What was he expected to do in those days before the ex-cyclone, and I underline ex-cyclone, hit? Give another press conference, maybe. I mean, Labor sure has got press conferences covered. I've got a question for you. How many Labor politicians can you squeeze onto a small stage in Lismore to say that floods are bad and victims could get a handout for their losses? Let's count how many the local Labor MP could pack on the stage today to say, hello, hello, we're here.
I'd like to welcome our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, here to Lismore on a return visit, and I can say it's really pleasing for me and the whole community to have the Prime Minister here, particularly given the things that we've gone through with this flood event. Also with the Prime Minister is the Deputy Prime Minister, Miles. We also have Special Envoy Tony Sheldon. We have the Minister for Emergency Management Australia, Jenny McAllister. Also, we have here two state ministers, Ministers Sharp and Minister Jackson. We have Kevin Hogan, federal MP for Page.
Astonishing, and not a shovel or a broom between them. Do you think at least one or two of those Labor politicians could have been more useful behind their desk, actually organising stuff? Now, you did see there the Defence Minister, Richard Marles. I know what he could have been doing instead. Because let me start on what really needs saying today. It needs politicians acting on. Donald Trump. The US president has now changed the game for Australia. And it's like, wakey time. We cannot rely anymore on Americans to come save us in a war. In fact, we can't even rely on America not to grab back the nuclear submarines we're paying America to build and which we desperately need. Here's the US President's pick for Under Secretary of Defence for Policy. His evidence to the Senate Armed Services Committee last week, warning the US might need to take back our submarines for itself for a war against China very soon.
But the problem is that we are, as Secretary Rubio has said and others, there's a very real threat of a conflict in the coming years, God forbid, over, along the first island chain. And our attack submarines, as you know well, Senator, are absolutely essential for making the defense of Taiwan or otherwise a viable and practical option, to my conversation with Senator Cotton. So if we can produce the attack submarines in sufficient number and sufficient speed, then great. But if we can't, that becomes a very difficult problem because we don't want our servicemen and women to be in a weaker position and more vulnerable, and God forbid worse, because they're not in the right place in the right time.
That's one thing. There's no guarantee we'll actually get those submarines we're paying for. But here's the second. Would Donald Trump even want to rescue us if China, say, cut us off with the blockades? Maybe a part of the wider war on Taiwan. I want to show you how little Donald Trump actually cares for rescuing any country but his own. And some of this, I have to say, is shocking to me. Now, you may think, that attitude is actually good. You may think it's bad, whatever. Let's just deal with the reality. In the past week, Trump has cut military aid to Ukraine, which is a democracy fighting for its life for 3 years now against an invading army for Russia. He's also cut US intelligence to Ukraine, intelligence Ukraine needs to warn it of incoming Russian missiles and to give it army coordinates to hit Russian targets right back. The inevitable has now happened. Russia has stepped up its bombing of Ukrainian cities. Last Friday, hitting 7 apartment buildings in one eastern city alone, killing at least 11 people. Also, the Ukrainian army that had captured part of Russian territory to hopefully swap for Ukrainian territory captured by Russia is now blinded. Lack of intelligence. It's in danger of being cut off by Russian forces. It can't now get the targeting information it needs to attack. But Donald Trump says this is actually his plan.
Do you, Mr. President, think that Vladimir Putin is taking advantage of the U.S. pause right now on intelligence and military aid to Ukraine?
No, I actually think he's doing what anybody else would do. I think I think he wants to get it stopped and settled, and I think he's hitting them harder than he's been hitting them. And I think probably anybody in that position would be doing that.
So it seems very clear that Trump's plan is to end this war by forcing democratic Ukraine to stop fighting in its defense against the invading Russian tyranny.
Russia is pounding Ukraine.
That's right.
Why not provide Ukraine with air defenses? And what happens, Mr. President, when Ukraine runs out of
Well, because
Patriot missile
yeah,
batteries?
good question. Because I have to know that they want to settle.
Never mind past American guarantees, like in 1991. It agreed to guarantee Ukraine's safety if Ukraine handed Russia its nuclear weapons from the Soviet era. Russia was a fool to believe it. But there's more. You also see Trump attacking allies. Last week he smashed Canada with his 25% tariff, told it to become America's 51st state. He also dismissed the NATO security pact between Europe, Canada and the US, where they guarantee to come to each other's rescue if one of them's attacked.
We said, we got a problem, France, we got a problem, a couple of others I won't mention. Do you think they're going to come and protect us? They're supposed to. I'm not so sure.
What's he talking about? In fact, the only time that NATO guarantee of mutual self-defense was invoked was to help America after the 9/11 attack. European countries like France, they did join America in the invasion and the occupation of Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban. Even Ukraine sent soldiers to help America in Afghanistan. Can you believe that? Even though it wasn't even in NATO. Ukraine sent soldiers. Did you hear Trump saying thank you? Showing respect? But it gets even worse. Trump says he won't defend NATO countries. Won't defend even NATO countries that don't pay enough for their own defense.
If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them.
Now, in one sense, that could sound reasonable. And there's a strong point that he's making. But that Trump official that I showed you at the top about the submarines, he said Australia doesn't pay enough either. He said last week, Australia should be spending 50% more on our defence than we do already. 50% more. Of course, there's a point. In fact, our armed forces are so weak now they couldn't even track and properly monitor the 3 Chinese ships a week and a half ago that circled our coast, practicing firing their guns and missiles at us. I mean, just one of those Chinese ships had 112 missile launch system cells. 112. How many missiles that it could fire do you think we'd be able to shoot down before they hit Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne? Yeah. And if Trump doesn't come and rescue us, I mean, sitting ducks. And it gets worse again. I told you we are in la-la land. We're asleep. Our politicians should be running around doing something about this. This is the last example I give. Maybe you do think America will still save us, or at least, you know, we could use the great equipment it's sold us or is selling us, like the nuclear subs, if we ever get them, or the F-35A Lightning jets that we've bought. Surely we could at least use them. But the US is even reported to have partially halted support for the F-16 fighter jets it's sent to Ukraine. And this affects their radar jamming, leaving those aircraft more vulnerable. Now, there is no actual kill switch in the US to actually switch off the fighters completely. Click! The ones that it sells allies. But its Air Force does control who gets the critical software upgrades. That's still in American hands. They sell you the planes, they've got the software. And now Germany is worrying about their own F-35s that it's buying from America. Could the US cripple them too if they were, say, defending Europe from Russia? In Britain, there are even warnings now that the US could disable the Trident missiles in British submarines that carry nuclear warheads. Has there been any debate here about any of this? I mean, I did hear Richard Marles today, the Defence Minister, not answering one question on the ABC, asked a couple of times, blah, 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 you know. No real response. Oh, she'll be right. Now, it's true. A lot of what I've just shown you and described might just be Trump bluster. That's what we're told. No, this is how he does business, just says something and people react and then he gets the best deal and it's all fine. But look, at least, yes, it's got Europe spending more on its defence, and that is a very big and good thing. But a statesman, a president, is a very different thing from a businessman. He or she, a Thatcher, they must also deal in trust and in values, and that's what Trump is getting wrong. We don't see him defending values in cutting Ukraine, democratic Ukraine, off of the knees. And we don't see him building trust with countries like us, which have helped the US in war and now cannot tell if Trump would help them back. And we can't base our defence on a hunch that Trump is just bluffing. Either way, we must now defend ourselves as fast as we can. I fear it's already too late. But only the blind and deaf and dumb would think we do nothing.